Corey, the NBA is going to start at some point. We're still not exactly sure. It's been a long negotiation. Jared Dudley came out today and said he probably is going to be the 22nd, and they will start before Christmas. I mean, what do you expect out of this?
I mean, look, it really comes down to like what we said before. If you want to get paid the full salary, you got to play. So I think it'd be wise for them to start on the December 22nd for a plethora of reasons. One, you get that PR on the Christmas day. That's a really essential part, I think, of the calendar for the NBA, along with All-Star Weekend, right? And you get to wrap everything up before the Summer Olympics, so you really respect those television deals. You can lean in on the ratings. But the issue is, the teams that went so far in the bubble, do they have enough time to rest and recover? And then will that first half of the season be a lot of resting and load management, which won't be very interesting basketball, but at least we'll have basketball. I mean, what are your thoughts, Kurt?
Yeah, exactly. I think, look, that's 500 million reasons to do it. Plus, they were saying, like, it bleeds into next season. If you don't, the real goal is, and I think we'll all go over and knock on wood, that there's a vaccine next summer, like has been sort of predicted. We're all on that timeline. And, Fauci said last week, maybe in the fourth quarter, you can start putting sporting events back together with people in arenas. That's what the NBA is banking on. Get back on its normal schedule, make most of its money back in 2021. To do that, you have to start on December, condensed schedule, end it before the Olympics, because they do not want to run the playoff. The NBA is worried about running the playoffs up against the Olympics for really good financial reasons. They're just going to lose viewers. So I think that this gets done. What this ultimately comes down to for the players is they're arguing over the escrow amount and how much is taken out of their paychecks to balance out the 50-50 split in the league. They are willing to take, hey, use this as a negotiating leverage, take less this year, and maybe even spread it out over the pain over a couple years rather than one big painful year. Find some way to do that, but I got to think they're going to get it done, Corey.
Yeah, and I think, like, what's the worst case scenario, right? You're going to extend it again, or you say, look, we're not going to extend the negotiating period. We're going to have to renegotiate the CBA. We're going to have a lockout. Just take the bullet this season, have a very short, truncated season, and then basically put all your marbles in for 2021 and say we're going to start on time, have a full-length season, and make sure we have fans in the stands, and just say 2021 was a wash. I mean, but that's worst case, though.
That's worst case, but look, 2020 didn't go well for them, but they got in 2/3 of a season. It's 2020. This next season, they're not going to have fans in the stands probably for most of, if not any of it. This is going to be a more financially painful season, and you're better in some ways just ripping off the Band-Aid, getting it over with, getting all the TV money you can, and moving on and being back on schedule in a year. And I think both sides realize that. It's just been some very public, painful negotiations as they did some saber rattling, right? Like it just read that way where they go back and forth in the media.
Yeah, but not as public and painful as baseball.
No. There was no Mike Trout. They won on that one.
So the NBA draft is rapidly approaching, and we thought it'd be a fun idea to just kind of pick, just go backwards from the top 10 picks down. So today we're going to go through picks 10 through 7, see what those teams need and who they might pick up. So, Kurt, let's jump right into it. Number 10 is the Phoenix Suns. They had an unbelievable run in the bubble there, 8-0, led by almost like the transcendent play of Devin Booker, who emerged as one of the bubble stars. But they did it all without one of their key pieces, Kelly Oubre. So going into this draft, they have a high draft pick, relatively high draft pick. And the question is, what pieces does this team need to be successful? My first thought is, you have a very young core, and the main thing that you need is chemistry, right? And maturity. You have a lot of young talent, but the question is, do they know how to win games consistently? Do they know how to get it done every night and play at a championship level? And I just don't think you're going to get that through the draft. So my opinion is they're probably going to use this pick either to trade for a veteran or someone who's a good culture fit that's an older player. But I'd love to hear your thoughts, Kurt. What do you think?
No, I think you're right on about what they need. They should go out and get a Jared Dudley type of guy, if nothing else, right? And maybe not Jared Dudley himself, but there are a handful of those guys around the league. They can play a little. That's fine. What you're really getting him in there for is the locker room. The way Miami uses Udonis Haslem, that kind of thing. You need that guy in the locker room in Phoenix. I don't know that they can get much for the 10 pick is the problem. There's just everybody's trying to trade out. I don't know that there's much value there. If they do anything, I think that there are players, look, they want they need some backup depth at the guard spots. So, behind, as great as Devin Booker is, they just need, and Ricky Rubio will be back at point guard. You need some depth there. You could go with somebody like Aaron Nesmith out of Vanderbilt, like best shooter in the draft. Corey, you don't go wrong when you take the best shooter in the draft. Like, just bottom line, like guys fall and they're like, well, Klay Thompson's the best shooter in the draft. We'll just take the best shooter in the draft. Somebody's got to grab Nesmith because he's that guy. And he'd be a great fit coming off the bench in Phoenix, just adding some instant offense.
Yeah, look, you can never go wrong with a shooter, right?
Yeah, exactly.
And the one thing, if they are going to pick up somebody, I thought they might go in the direction of a Tyrese Halliburton. Just try someone who can distribute the ball and be that kind of the floor general that they need. Because look, Devin Booker, he can score with the ball in his hands. He can come off the dribble. Off a screen and shoot. He can drive to the basket. He can do a little bit of everything for you. But it might make his life a little easier if he can play off the ball a little more and just have someone who can execute the offense and just let him focus on scoring. So I can see either way.
I like Halliburton a lot for them too. That'd be the other thing he brings is he's a high IQ player who can walk in the door and help you tomorrow. And that's what they need. They are not looking for a 4-year development project. Like, they want a guy who can help win now because they are thinking playoffs in what's going to be, by the way, a stacked Western Conference. It's just not going to be easy to make the playoffs in the West. It is loaded. They're going to have to get help up front. And Halliburton's a guy who could, again, step in. Nesmith can do this too. There's a couple other guys in the draft that could follow them. Just get them in there because they can help tomorrow, and that's what they need. There's no waiting around in Phoenix right now.
There's a lot of happening in the Washington Wizards locker room right now. I feel like they've had John Wall and Bradley Beal for years now, and they have not been able to translate that into wins. So when you look at this draft, they have the 9th pick in the draft. And once again, the draft, one could argue that it's not as heavy talented-wise as past drafts. The question is, what can the Wizards do to pull from it? I look at this and I say, you have Bradley Beal, who had an unbelievable season, averaging plus 30 points a game, but it's just not translating into like that culture that is a winning culture. His contract expires at the end of next season. John Wall has a couple more years left on his contract. You're paying him upwards of $40 million a year. Hard to build a good team around that. Bertans is a great piece for them. I think you go for someone like Obi Toppin in this draft, who I think might slip into a little later pick because of his age. And people say, he's not a great defensive player, but he is, in my opinion, the best pound for pound player. In the draft, what he did in college was amazing. I think that he can come in, learn under John Wall, and then hopefully become a franchise type of player, or at least someone who can, really help that team go to the next level in a couple years' time. And what do you think, Kurt?
I love Obi Toppin in this draft. I think would be a great fit there because that gives them another wing player to go outside. You've got Wall and Beal. If you need somebody else that can go in there, they're looking for depth at the 1 and the 5 too. So if they can find a point guard that can distribute a little bit and come off the bench, maybe Killian Hayes or somebody, the depth would help them. They're not getting necessarily contributor unless somebody like Obi Toppin falls to them, or Isaac Okoro, who is the guy I love in this draft, who can come in and defend right away and has the build he's got to work on his offense, but he has the build and the game to get there and become a really quality player in this draft. I love that fit, but we'll see. They've got to re-sign Davis Bertans. Like this is the all-in year for them, right? Like, yeah, Wall and Beal are healthy. We're going to make it happen. If it doesn't happen, the Beal sweepstakes open up, and then it gets interesting because there's a lot of teams kind of eyeing him and have been circling. The GMs have been circling like vultures around that for a while, right? Like waiting to pick that carcass. It hasn't happened yet. They're going to go all in. It's going to be interesting. If they struggle the first half of the year and it gets up to the deadline, it's going to get interesting, Corey.
Yeah, Bill's been playing, basically out of his mind, but it's kind of been off the radar because, Washington, I think, only won 20 games last year. Some really paltry amount. But when you look at Okoro, for instance, do you think that he'll be able to grow in that system? Do you think that he'll have like some sort of, someone to learn from, or how do you think he'll be able to develop his game in that locker room?
Washington hasn't been the best developmental program in the league for years, has it? I mean, that's part of. I mean, you think about who develops and like, oh, why can't we find a guy like OG Anunoby and Pascal Siakam? Well, part of it's finding him, and part of it is Toronto's the best developmental program in the league right now. Utah developed guys and made, Donovan Mitchell and Rudy Gobert was like 27th or something, and took years to build him up. Programs are part of that, getting the right player, but then teams that know how to develop talent. Washington's kind of got to show they can do that. They really just, as an organization, they're one of those teams that just has never really done that well enough.
Yeah, so we'll see what they can do with this draft. Tom Shepard's coming in. He's new. This is his first year. So looking as the GM, so he's been in the front office for a long time, but maybe he'll come in and switch things up a little bit. But I think Bertans is a really great role player. Talking about development, he grew here in San Antonio, where I'm from, and then now is putting up incredible, valuable minutes for Washington.
Yeah, San Antonio was another one of the gold standard. I mean, how many years in a row did they keep pulling guys at the end of the draft, and in 3 years be like, where do they find this guy? Like year after year, they pulled that off. And Bertans is one of those guys who's come out and is about to get a payday, man. He has earned it, and he's about to make mid-teens in money, and has earned every penny of it.
New York, pick number 8. It's going to the Knicks. The Knicks have had a litany of issues over the past few years. I think of the 90s with Latrell Sprewell. That was the last time there was a gleaming hope in the city that I now call home. But look, you have a great young core of players. I know that RJ Barrett didn't have the first year that that we wanted from him, that we expected from him from what we saw at Duke. Knox is growing into his own, but Julius Randle is really kind of basically kind of providing that leadership for them. He's no longer a young guy in the league. He's coming in, showing that leadership for the Knicks, but there's a long way to go. I think this is another scenario where you're not looking to the draft to get another young talent for New York, right? I think what you need in New York is you need stability, you need culture, you need leadership, you need consistency. And when you watch the Knicks play, you don't really see any of those things, unfortunately. So I think what they need to do is find a way to get someone like, you mentioned it before, someone like a Udonis Haslem in that locker room, just to show this is what we're about, this is what we can do, and this is how we bring it every single day to teach those young guys how to win consistently. What do you think, Kurt?
First things first, don't draft a power forward. Like, we're done, right? We're loaded with power forwards, no more. Honestly, I think you're right on about them needing veteran leadership in there. And like somebody like Drew Holiday, who's now available now, he probably wants to go to a contender, and you might have to really kind of overpay to keep him. So not necessarily that guy, but if you can get in, they need point guard help. And if you can get in a veteran point guard who can come in and just competently run the offense, that is a huge plus for them. That is a huge advantage. So I'm with you. I think that they'll look to either trade up and go after a star. There's rumors that they want a Wiseman, or LaMelo Ball has been linked there before. He's a developmental project, and he's also high ceiling, high floor, high risk, high reward. I don't know if the Knicks want to go there, but they need talent. At the end of the day, look, Mitchell Robinson and RJ Barrett may be good players in the future as they develop, and Tom Thibodeau's pretty good at developing talent. They just need talent on this roster, and a lot of it. And so, if Isaac Okoro or somebody falls to them, grab that. But I think that they would rather trade up and take a swing at somebody who could potentially be a star, because they don't have, look, they just don't have that guy on the roster. There is nobody you look at on that roster, with all due respect to RJ, and say, that's the alpha. That's the guy. That's the cornerstone. I don't know who that guy is right now.
And it's interesting, though, when you had this is before Tibbs and all, but when you had Kristaps Porzingis, you had a guy who most teams in the league would, give their right arm for. Yeah. You had a guy that you could build around, develop a whole franchise around, and they were unable to get it done. So when you look at that front office, that ownership, and what they were, I guess, what they failed to do with Kristaps, hopefully, they can do this new front office, new head coach can develop the young talent like RJ and unlock that potential, so you don't have a repeat of Kristaps. But then you have other scenarios where we've seen New York go out and get, high dollar talent to try to bring them in. But that doesn't really work out for them either. So I think New York's in a pickle. We'll see what happens. But from my perspective, I think you lean in, on Tibbs, lean on what you have. Yeah. And I think you build that and bring in the veteran leadership.
Yeah, exactly. You bet on Tibbs. You bet on Leon Rose being able to get guys around them. And hey, with Leon Rose, part of the job of every GM is to keep ownership at arm's length, right? Do not let them start making calls on player personnel. That is especially important in New York. You need to keep James Dolan out of the basketball operations side of this. Phil Jackson did that with up and down success. You've got to keep him out and not rush this. It's not going to happen. The Knicks are not a playoff team next year. They're not don't overdo it. Just build something solid. That's what Brooklyn, if we're going to use examples, the Lakers, Brooklyn, built through the draft, got good young players, made trades, built a core that superstars looked at and said, I want to be there. You've got to build that foundation right now.
Yeah, and we're looking at Utah right now. Like what Denver's doing. Denver is looking like that kind of team where they spent 5 years building everything, and then now it's like, wow, this is a contender.
And the thing is,
but it's going to take time.
And I think that there's this sense that Knicks fans are like, oh, it's New York. We're not patient. We've got to win now. Knicks fans are really smart basketball fans. If they see progress, if they see what's being built as a foundation working, I think there is a sense of patience. Like, they would buy into the hope if they saw something consistently building towards that. They just haven't seen that.
Yeah, so hopefully the drought will come to an end soon, and we'll have some great Knicks teams back in the Garden, because I mean that's a mecca for basketball. And I remember my first time at the Garden, I was like, man, to play here every day, could you imagine?
There's nothing like it. There's just no building like it.
The Detroit Pistons are coming in at number 7 here in the draft. They did a huge offseason swap, Drummond for Blake Griffin, building a team around him. They have Derrick Rose on a 2-year contract. Brandon Knight's a good player for them. The question is, how do they take Detroit into the next level? Right now, they're really struggling. They did not have a good season last year. So I think from my perspective, when I look at what they need as a team, I'm thinking, look, you need a shooter. You have D Rose, you have Brandon Knight, you got point guard play, you got Blake Griffin, who's one of the best bigs. I think that you just need someone who can come in, help you win now. And the best place to go is shooters. So I'm looking at a guy like Marcus Howard from Marquette. I know he's small, but he put together a great resume in college. I think that's where you go. What do you think, Kurt?
They need playmaking too. They've got, again, Blake Griffin doesn't really create his own shot. Like, you're going to need some guys who can help on that. Derrick Rose can't off the bench, but that's why I think they might look at someone like Killian Hayes out of France, or somebody, or Tyrese Halliburton if he fell that far. Somebody who's a setup guy, somebody who's Killian Hayes has played 72 games at the French #1 league as a point guard playing pick and roll basketball. He can walk in and run that, maybe not at an elite level, but he can run it at an NBA level from day one. And there's something to that. I think that they've got to look for that, but they need talent, and they've got to decide where they're going long term. I mean, they can make a push this year, but Blake Griffin's not getting younger. Are they going to do that, or are they going to start thinking about turning the corner and rebuilding? I don't know what direction they're going to go in Detroit right now, but they're kind of at a crossroads. They've either kind of got to go all in on this, or they've got to start rebuilding.
Yeah, with all of those midseason trades too, it looks like the team's trying to figure out what the identity of the team is in Detroit. So we'll see what they end up doing, whether they go for a point guard or a shooter. Only time will tell.
They've got to re-sign Christian Wood this summer. That's a big one. He broke out after Drummond was gone. I love him, but that's a core piece you can start with, but you got to get players around him too.